But first, we have to get to our top story, and that's going to go to John Kingston, as we have two updates coming out of California. First one dealing with a CARB initiative, and if there was an extension released. John, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. It's good to hear you guys today. Unlike yesterday, but anyway.
We try. We'll try again if we have to, nevertheless. So, John, we've got two interesting updates coming up here. First, let's first touch on CARB in terms of this deadline that was supposed to be January 1st gets moved back a month, perhaps due to a little bit of pressure. What's going on here?
Well, that one. Okay, there's a lot of things going on out there. Okay. Let's first talk about the Drage rule, because I think it's probably the most significant. Okay. The Advanced Clean Fleets rule was really going to start to take effect on January 1st. Operationally, the only thing that really was significant on that was the fact that you could no longer register a non-zero emission vehicle in the state's Drage registry. The state of California never got a waiver from the EPA to allow the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. They did get a waiver to allow the Advanced Clean Trucks rule. And let's note that a waiver doesn't really exempt you from the regulations. In the case of California in the Clean Air Act, it allows you to go above those regulations. So the California Trucking Association a couple of months ago filed suit saying they needed a waiver. The state came back and announced, right before Christmas, that they had reached agreement with the CTA to delay the implementation of the Drage registry rule until they got their waiver. Now, according to the American Trucking Associations, they think that waiver could take all or a good part, if not all, of a year. And during that time, you're going to be allowed to register internal combustion engine vehicles for as long as that's in place. Now, when CARB announced this, they said they reserved the right to go back and sort of disqualify trucks from being in the registry. But maybe if you've got something that you were planning on phasing out, now you've been given it a few more months to ride, and you'll register it with the registry, and you'll get a little extra capacity there. I don't know what the impact is. I just have to think that anybody that was going to register an ICE vehicle and wanted to get in before the deadline probably already did so. Will there be a rush of new vehicles coming in? I have my doubts about that. But the other thing is that CARB said in its letter to CTA, which was publicized, that apparently the CTA was about to go to court seeking an injunction, trying to block the Advanced Clean Fleets rule, and they would no longer do so. There were also requirements on phasing out older vehicles under the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. Those also have been put on hold. They're a little kind of complicated, whether your vehicle fits. But obviously it wouldn't affect a newer vehicle, but something from, let's say, 2010 vintage or so might have fallen under it. So, this is a retreat by CARB. They don't normally retreat. They normally win all the time, but they didn't win here, at least not for now.
And John, we're looking at this extension by a month. Is this material? Is this enough for enough activity to enter? Or do we see that there might be another extension after this?
So the extension of the month is on a different rule. It's the California Clean Truck Check rule. It's going to require companies, trucks, to use their onboard diagnostics to download data about their emissions. Most vehicles on the road will have that capability within their ELD. If you don't, if it's an older vehicle, you're going to have to take it to a facility to do it. You are going to have to register your truck with the Clean Truck Check by December 31st. I did a piece for Freightways about, first or second week of December, and talked to some people who said, they were kind of surprised at how many truck owners really didn't know about this. So it looks to me like California, like CARB, decided that, yes, we got a lot of people out there who really don't know what's going on. Let's give them another month. I don't think it's a significant impact on this, but it's just it's just 30 more days if you hadn't registered, or 31 more days if you hadn't registered. Now you have that time to go do it.
In the case of
now,
this,
the third one you asked me about, because it kept me busy during Christmas. Okay, the third one is the rule on warehouses. And it was a rule that required warehouses to meet certain scores by reducing their emissions, so they could do things to earn points. They could, let's say, put in solar panels. for example. But the main way of getting there would be to have trucks visit you that are ZEVs, or the trucks within your warehouse become ZEVs. So the California Trucking Association filed suit against that as well, and they lost. The argument was that the rule amounted to a ZEV mandate. The court said no, it did not. I mean, it could be appealed. And the one thing they said was that if it was truly an emissions rule, that the points given out for a ZEV visit would differ on the basis of how far the truck had traveled. So right now, if you're a warehouse, if you're running Anthony Smith warehouse, and a ZEV comes to visit you to drop something off, and they're bringing it from a warehouse a mile away, you would get the same number of points as if Bill Priestley, who was 50 miles away, drove a ZE vehicle to your facility and offloaded there. Their argument was that if it was the court's finding was that if it was truly an emissions rule and therefore a ZEV mandate, that you would get more points for the one that Bill did that many more miles away. So the CTA lost that one. That really wasn't against. I mean, can I say that was against CARB? I guess it was, but it's no. I'm sorry. It was a Southern California Air Quality Management District. It was not CARB. So yeah, you've had three significant decisions. And this isn't an emissions rule, but let's note that it could be today, it could be next week, it could be a couple of weeks. We expect a ruling on the request for a new injunction against AB5 out in California. The arguments, the oral arguments, were in early November. I know that the California Trucking Association, which brought the original lawsuit, had said that they felt that there might be a ruling by the end of the year. There was not, but it could come today. I mean, believe me, I check Pacer on this about 5 times a day to make sure that the ruling hasn't dropped.
California, if nothing else, certainly keeps you on your toes. Let me jump back to the point that you were making about the phasing out of older vehicles. Obviously, that gets a little bit of a stay there as well. That seems to be a lot of, I don't want to say necessarily red tape, but it seems to be a lot of basically, hurdle jumping in terms of trying to figure out, does this vehicle comply? Does it not comply? It seems like there's a lot more work that needs to be put in that, and doesn't that make that a whole lot more difficult in terms of, this, granted, this stay allows you to do a little bit more research to see if your vehicle complies or not, but at the same time, this looks like just an absolute mountain of work that someone's going to have to do to try to verify that these vehicles are indeed compliant.
Well, I mean, actually, you're really not. I mean, the rules on whether they have to be phased out, I don't want to repeat them too verbatim because I'm going to mess it up, but they have to do with the number of years of the model, or the number of years the truck has been on the road, or the number of miles it has totally driven. And then at that point, you have to shut it down. I'm not going to repeat it because I'm going to screw it up, okay? I'm going to screw it up. But so it's actually pretty straightforward, at least it seems to me to be pretty straightforward. But if you had a truck that was about to hit that deadline, you've basically got more time now.
And John, of course, while I have you on, I always have to ask you about what's going on in the energy markets, and especially, is there any impacts coming from the Red Sea, or has it been nothing at all just yet?
Well, there should be impacts coming from the Red Sea, but there aren't, because you're going to really, in essence, be tying up inventory for a lot longer time as it goes around the Cape of Good Horn rather than through the Suez Canal. And yet, the market yesterday opened up, first day of trading after the new year, opened up, and then ended up down for the day. Today it's up a little bit, but nothing much. I wrote a story yesterday where I quoted Helena Croft, who's a well-known oil analyst, who was saying she can't understand this, that this thing should be going higher given the problems with the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. But so far, they're just not there.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting situation. And we also have Greg Miller and Sal Mercado coming out later to talk about rates and how they've been affected by the conflicts in that region of the world there as well. But certainly interesting to see that oil prices and fuel prices, diesel prices, have not gone up as a result of, like you said, longer shipping routes going around Africa to try and get to the American and perhaps the Eastern European or the Western European markets there as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, I know when OPEC Plus made its cuts in April, and then the Saudis made their cuts in June, for a long time, there just didn't seem to be any reaction. And then all of a sudden, there was a reaction. So, markets can do that. They know it, and then they don't really act on it, and suddenly they act on it. And maybe they'll suddenly act on it when they see markets start to tighten up as a result of so much inventory essentially being taken out of usable form and being stuck on a tanker that's, going around the Cape of Good Horn for a couple of weeks. So these things sometimes tend to happen really quickly.
Awesome, John. Thanks for joining us this morning. Great to start the new year off with you this time on Wednesday.
Yep.
We'll check in again with you, I'm sure, throughout this week.
Well, we'll see you Friday for the employment report.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, John. Let's move over to the wall for our first carrier update of the morning.